Spikes are better than stealth rocks. This is an idea I've been kind of flirting with over the last couple of months, and I think at this point I'm ready to do a video on it. So today we're going to talk about why I think spikes are better than stealth rocks in the current Scarlet and Violet Draft League metagame, what you can do in your drafting portion to account for this, and how you can prep with that in mind. So the main reason that I've been thinking about for why spikes are better than stealth rocks is kind of twofold in Draft League. But let's kind of step back a little bit. Stealth rocks have been kind of the dominant hazard for a long time and across all Pokemon really. Being introduced in Generation 4, they've dominated OU ever since. And mainly the reason is they punish flying types. And a lot of the common flying types we see in these metagames, definitely get punished by stealth rocks. I think of Pokemon like Zapdos, Thundurus are good examples. But Pokemon like a Tornadus get really punished as well. These are key Pokemon that get punished by stealth rocks. And then fire types as well. A little bit less common, but we see, the Charizards are big ones, Charizard Y, Charizard X in your Gen 6 to 7s. So what the big introduction in Generation 8 was heavy duty boots, giving an item to protect these Pokemon from stealth rocks. And what you basically saw as a result was a lot of flying types, a lot of fire types, and the combinations of those types, including bug type as well, would start running heavy duty boots. So Pokemon like Volcarona, which used to be completely neutralized by stealth rocks, got access to a great item to prevent any damage from stealth rocks in battle. Pokemon like Zapdos use it to operate in a defensive role, and then you see even Pokemon offensively use it on stuff like Tornadus on offensive and defensive sets. So what changed from Generation 8, where heavy duty boots was introduced, to Generation 9 to make spikes better now? Well, if we take a look at the draft board, the metagame is dominated by a lot of fighting types, as well as the steel types being at the top of the metagame, as they usually always are. But a lot of these Pokemon were introduced in Gen 9, really inflating the number of the Stealth Rock resists at the top of the metagame. We see Pokemon like Great Tusk, Iron Valiant, both introduced in Gen 9 in 19 points, 2 of the 3 top Pokemon in this metagame. We see Iron Treads, another new Pokemon introduced as well, Steel type. What are other Pokemon that we have that were introduced as we go across the board? We have Goldengo introduced in this generation, Annihilate introduced in this generation, Iron Hands, a personal favorite, introduced in this generation as well. That looks to be all in this point. And then we get down to a big one, which we'll cover again in a second. Quackavolt down at 13 points. This is a much higher number of fighting and steel types in the top half of the board than would be in most other formats. And a lot of these Pokemon aren't going to run heavy duty boots that often because they're naturally resistant to stealth rocks, and teams that draft stealth rocks as their most common hazard, these Pokemon are going to be able to run other items very, very freely. So the second big thing that really matters with this is we lost a lot of defoggers moving from Generation 8 to Generation 9, meaning that hazard removal is kind of at a premium, and the number of viable hazard removers is going to be pretty low. So let's focus in on what the top ones actually are. Great Tusk, for example, really the premier hazard removal in this generation. Iron Treads is a good one. Terapagos, a new Pokemon. I've used that before. Really, really good hazard removal. We go across the way. We see, I think Zapdos still retains defog in this generation. And then we go over to 13 points. We see Excadrill and Quackavolt here as hazard removals. What is the common link between all of these Pokemon? The fact that they resist stealth rocks. This is, if you look at all of the top hazard removals in Generation 9 Draft League, they all resist stealth rocks, which is really, really key when we talk about hazard removal. Is these Pokemon are actually not really punished to remove hazards in this metagame if your hazard of choice is stealth rocks, which makes spikes even more important. You're going to need to actually punish these Pokemon in your battles for removing hazards. One spike is often better than one stealth rock, and you have access to set up even multiple spikes if the game goes right your way. So these are the two reasons I look at in this metagame and say, wow, this metagame very, very hostile towards stealth rocks, very much a metagame that we need to be prioritizing spikes. So when we were drafting, what should we be looking for in terms of spikers? Now, if you look at the top of the metagame, there's a lot of good spikers at the top, and a lot of them are going to be naturally your first round picks that you'll end up getting on your team. Deoxys Speed, Greninja, Meowscarada, Garchomp. If we look at the top 8 Pokemon in this metagame, that's 4 right there that you can have a spiker in your top 4 picks. Now, I've given a lot of flack to Garchomp for being a spiker and stealth rocker as your number 1 option. I'll give it that. But if you get on the back wheel and you get a really good offensive Pokemon along with it, hey, no complaints from me on that one. But if you look at the teams like that I've built very frequently, you'll see they always include a Greninja, a Meowscarlet. These are probably my 2 most drafted Pokemon. I don't think I've had a team that I can remember that's gone home without these. And that's because spikes are just so valuable, and being able to force turns to set up spikes offensively is going to be your best way to do that in Scarlet and Violet. This metagame is very, very offensive. There are some balanced cores that you can go with that work in 8-mon draft, but you're really going to want to prioritize spiking with offensive Pokemon, and these 2 are probably some of the best to do it. Deoxys Speed as well, very, very good. Garchomp, it's a good spiker. I think with that Pokemon, as I said, I've really criticized a lot of the Hazard 3 attack sets, and I think you should be prioritizing Scale Shot, Swords Dance as much as possible with Garchomp because of how powerful that set is. From drafting with this in mind on the defensive side, I don't really think there's much you really need to do. I'm someone who's kind of been on the record that hazard removal not really a big deal in this generation. I think you either get one of the good ones or you just don't really have to worry about it at all. Getting a Pokemon like Hitmontop, it's not going to deter people from hazard stacking you. So I think the way that you should approach this is make your team hazard deterrent or have a good remover. Something like Great Tusk, Terrapico's 2 really, really solid removers. But you can also instead just build a team that's hazard deterrent. Iron Valiant, draft a Pokemon like Ting-Lu after, hazard, deterrent on Stealth Rocks on both fronts there. You can get Pokemon like Goldengo, get Pokemon like Galarian Slowking with Regenerator that deter hazard damage that way. Those are kind of the 2 ways I would look about at this draft board, and how do I handle that is, draft Rock Resist and draft your hazard removals as long as they're good. So to see this theory play out in a battle, let's take my week 2 matchup against Seabad in the BBL, which you'll want to get subscribed to so you don't miss that battle when it drops on Sunday. So let's take a look from my perspective. Let's account for what are the Stealth Rock resists and what are the Stealth Rock weaknesses. The resists, pretty plentiful in this matchup. Garchomp, Iron Hands, it does have Terra, so I can Terra out of that weakness and likely will into something like a Dark type, and Metagross. These are 3 key Pokemon in this matchup. If we're not running Protean Greninja, we're running Battle Bond, or we're running Protean and we already Protean into another type, Garchomp actually doesn't die to Ice Beam for bulky sets on a lot of Greninja sets that you could run without a spike up. Stealth Rock can still live a decent amount of those hits. Iron Hands, it's likely to Terra, so it'll likely take the same damage from Spike and Stealth Rock, but before Terra, it's going to be able to come out on rocks a few times, not having to worry about that damage. The key one here is Metagross. Metagross is an easy Pokemon on the face for my team to answer, but without hazard damage can kind of create some odd turns for some of my Pokemon. Infernape might be forced into situations where it has to Flare Blitz instead of Knockoff, which can be really detrimental if something like Manaphy or Garchomp are still around in this matchup. Greninja, look, as much as I love Greninja, hey, its base stats on the attacking side can lack at certain points, and it's not going to be able to pick up all the kills it wants with Dark Pulse after a couple Stealth Rocks hits. The other thing to consider with spikes that we haven't really talked about is you can just set up multiple versions of these hazards. Getting 3 spikes up is huge in a metagame like this, where the margins are just so thin in terms of switching into these Pokemon. Let's then take a look at the hazard weaknesses when it comes to Stealth Rocks. Well, we got 2 here, Chi-Yu and Jumpluff. Am I going to consider Jumpluff a Pokemon in this matchup? For the purposes of this exercise, probably not. But the main one here is Chi-Yu, and it's a really, really big one here. So let's look at the speed tiers to see what is our percentage chance that this Chi-Yu is going to be heavy duty boots or not. Well, if you look at the speed tiers, Chi-Yu is only outsped by Infernape and Greninja. 2 Pokemon it really can't do much to anyway. So Choice Scarf, kind of off the table. The use case isn't really there. So it outspeeds the rest of my team, and the Pokemon it really wants to target is that Lunala. And realistically, as long as the Lunala Shadow Shield is broken, I can't really deal much damage to it either way. Boots just makes a lot of sense as natural counterplay into Lunala. So right here, if I'm looking at this matchup, I say, Jumpluff, not going to come. Chi-Yu, heavy duty boots. This is a great spikes matchup here, and we should be prioritizing our build to get up spikes rather than Stealth Rocks. So that's my quick rant today on why I think spikes are better than Stealth Rocks. Let me know what you think in the description down below. We didn't cover toxic spikes today, but toxic spikes are fraudulent anyway, so we don't have to worry about that too much. If you enjoy videos like this, where I kind of get into the deep analytical side of Pokemon Draft League, let me know in the comments down below. I always have many opinions than I am willing to share. So that's all I have for today. We'll see you on Sunday for the battle against Seabad, where you'll see this matchup live. And as always, have a wonderful day.